Hey everybody, Sage here. Lately, I've been making some big documentaries, mostly focused on technology and games. However, I'm taking a break from these big episodes right now to focus more on subjects that I don't think would fit an overly long duration. Of course, I'll still do some big episodes, heck, I'm already working on a few, but for the moment, I've got some tidbits up my sleeve that I think you'll find interesting. With that said, You Don't Know Jack got a game show. Bet you didn't see this coming. For those who don't know, You Don't Know Jack is a trivia game franchise that premiered in October of 1995, with its first iteration on the PC, developed by Chicago-based Jellyvision in collaboration with California-based Berkeley Systems, the latter of which was well known for its After Dark screensavers. The game, which asked players questions combining high culture with pop culture, with a sarcastic host to boot, would go on to become a huge success, spawning multiple sequels, spin-offs, and merchandise, so it only made sense that a game show was in the works. Development on it dates back as early as May of 1996, with game show producer Ron Greenberg and Warner Brothers on board to develop and air the pilot, which was scheduled to air in the fall of 1997. However, after a failed screening, it wasn't picked up for broadcast, and the project was shelved. That was until ABC picked up the rights in 2000, after the show got new producers the year prior. Panamort Television and Carsey Werner, the latter of which gave us The Cosby Show and Roseanne, as well as the extremely short-lived Dot Comedy. The new producers also brought in Paul Reubens of Pee Wee Herman fame as the main host, making it his first extended television role since Pee-wee's Playhouse. After 5 years in development limbo, the You Don't Know Jack game show was finally ready for primetime, premiering with 2 back-to-back half-hour episodes on June 20th, 2001. The first episode begins with a cameo from the late Regis Philbin, the then host of the hit ABC game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, who decides to give the new host a call to pass along some advice.
The first thing you should do is smile. Smile a lot. Everybody loves a guy who smiles.
Wow. Next thing you'll be telling me to dress sharp and the clothes make the show.
And dress sharp clothes make the show.
Okay, I will, Reg.
And another thing, the audience loves seeing other guys get rich. The more comfortable your guests are, the more likely they're going to win the big bucks.
Listen, Reg, you seem really busy. Let me let you run.
Did the new guy just hang up on me?
You think this show is going to make anybody but me a millionaire? Then you don't know Jack!
And thus we're introduced to Paul Reubens, who portrays the host Troy Stevens, while Tom Gottlieb reprises his role from the games as Cookie Masterson, albeit taking the back seat as announcer this time around. This was the first time a primetime game show on ABC was hosted by a fictional character, and would remain the only one until The Gong Show in 2017, with Mike Myers as Tommy Maitland. Each episode begins with Troy greeting the viewers in the audience and at home, whilst breaking the fourth wall.
You look different. Have you had some work done?
Afterwards, he meets the 3 new contestants that'll be playing on the show, but not before riding on a moving walkway. Much like with the other game shows, the contestants get a chance to talk about themselves, while Troy Stevens constantly makes jokes about them.
Angie, it says here that you have 7 roommates.
Yes.
What are you,
yes.
Snow White? What kind of cars do you sell?
Jeeps.
Cheap?
Jeep.
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 Afterwards, we get right to the game show itself, which consists of 4 rounds. The first round is where the host delivers up to 3 questions, usually worth $1,000, and are typically multiple choice questions, like the computer game. However, some questions aren't multiple choice, and usually have to guess an open-ended answer correctly, such as a fill-in-the-blank. Unlike the game, if a contestant gets a question wrong, they don't lose money, with some exceptions. Round 1 always ends with a dis or dat, which works pretty much the same as the computer games. Contestants are given 2 possible choices, and the one who buzzes in first has to guess if the given clue matches one of those 2 answers or both. After a commercial break, we get to the second round, which works pretty much the same as the first, albeit with the values doubled. Round 2 always ends with a $2 million question, which really isn't worth $2 million. The value starts decreasing as the host begins to read the question, only for him to be distracted by things like a sneeze, fighting with a dog for the question card, being attacked by ninjas, or setting the card on fire, just to name a few. Because of this, the actual amount is more like under $200. After another commercial break, we come to the third round, which again works pretty much the same as the first 2, albeit with the values tripled. Before the questions are read, however, a runners-up prize is announced, typically a basket of items such as deodorants, the clapper, bubblegum, hot sauce, yo-yos, and pineapple tidbits. Round 3 always ends with a math question that involves several elements of pop culture and fact. The contestants have only 30 seconds to solve the problem and write the answer down, all while they're constantly distracted by noises, whether it be a mariachi band, a baby crying, or playing the violins poorly. After time runs out, the correct answer is shown on screen, and the contestant who answered right gets $5,000. In the event of a tie for second place, a sudden death question is read by the host, and the person who answers right moves on, while the person who answers wrong doesn't. The last place contestant is then eliminated via a cheap CGI effect. After one final commercial break, the top 2 players move on to the final round, the Jack Attack, which plays similar to the computer game. The contestants are given a category and a series of clues, and one of them has to buzz in the correct answer that matches the clue. For every right answer, they gain $5,000, and lose $5,000 for every wrong answer. However, you do have to deal with a constant floating head that looks like something out of an FMV, as well as the constant voices of both Troy and Cookie. And yes, it does get irritating after a while.
Emma!
Toodles, gurgle, roids.
Emma Roids! Roids is correct!
As usual, the player with the most points at the end of the game wins. At first, the final scores for both contestants were shown in the first 2 episodes, but afterwards it was changed to only show the score of the winner. The first prize contestant goes home with the cash, while the runners-up goes home with the prizes mentioned earlier. So that's basically the format of the game show. Overall, it's not terrible, and it does have elements from the computer game in there. But something just feels a little off. The reason why You Don't Know Jack worked as a computer game was because it offered something that had never been done before on a technical level: the unique interactions with the player. The game show certainly has elements of that, but it's mostly with the contestants. On top of that, the games didn't have to show off a lush studio set or even a studio audience. Its strengths were in its writing and humor. Speaking of which, the comedy in the show is not as funny as in the games. I know, right? For a franchise that's had some bumpy roads once in a while. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any funny moments in the show. Some of them are predictable, but they still gave me a chuckle. For example, there's this contestant in the first episode who's both a doctor and an opera singer, and you probably know how this goes.
Sogni di gloria a Dio.
It just makes me wonder how he'll do in front of a crazy conductor.
Dio.
While there are some jokes that do work, others either fall flat or don't make sense. Like there's this contestant in another episode who says to have impaled her butt on a fence, and Troy inevitably makes a joke about it.
Wow, so you now have 3 holes in your butt.
Yes, I do.
That is what we call around here a bowling butt.
It later gets brought up during the This or Dat round, for no logical reason whatsoever. There's also moments in the show where it gets a little cruel and kinda uncomfortable. For example, one of the contestants in another episode is a ventriloquist. However, he didn't bring his dummy, so Troy shows him a woman laying in bed with his so-called dummy named Chucklehead. I'm sorry, but is this supposed to be funny?
Who's the dummy now?
Not me.
Sure, the computer game can get cruel at times, but for the most part it's pulled off pretty well. The host can also get quite a bit repetitive.
Correct, 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 correct.
Seriously, can you at least get a thesaurus? Speaking of repetitiveness, like I said earlier, every episode starts off the exact same way. He greets the audience, rides on the moving walkway, and meets the contestants. Yeah, did I mention he says the same thing over and over?
Let's cheat them. Let's meet them. 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 Let's cheat them. Let's meet them.
Sure, it was funny the first time, but by having them be your opening lines in every episode, it gets tiring after a while. Now granted, they would try something a little different with the moving walkway, like having Troy moonwalking in one episode, but even then it's not much. I don't necessarily blame Paul Reubens for this. Heck, I thought he was a fairly decent choice. It's mostly the writing that's off. And that's surprising given the fact that 2 of the writers for the show have worked on the games for years. They even brought in Joel Hodgson as a contributing writer for some episodes. Yes, that Joel Hodgson. Another problem I have with the show, and I know this is going to sound weird, is that most of the episodes don't really have much of a running theme or joke to them. Yes, the original games didn't really have a theme per episode, but with the later entries, especially the net show, they did have a recurring theme in each episode. Here, most of the show is just throwing random jokes or things at the viewer. For example, in the second episode, there's this Carl Lewis cameo that never gets brought up again, unless you count his appearance at the end. If they incorporated him as a guest for a question, like in the games, then maybe it could have worked. But instead, it's kinda pointless, outside of the fact that he's a celebrity. About halfway through the episode, we also get introduced to a Jack Terrier named Jack, during the $2 million question. who does come back during the third round as well as at the end. Now, if that episode put more of an emphasis on the dog as the running joke, then maybe it could have worked. Another example is in the hot sauce episode, which starts off with two women fighting over who gets to have Troy Stevens first. That gets dropped throughout the entire episode until the very end, where the two women decide to hang out with the host together anyways. Oh, and they also do a "I'm hot" kind of joke.
Why do you think they call it hot sauce?
I don't know, you tell me. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some episodes that do have a running joke or theme throughout. In the premiere episode, after Paul Reubens gets introduced to the world of game shows, there's this running joke where the host teases a brand new car to the winner, only for the host to drive off with it at the end. Now that should have set up the satirical tone the show was going for. There is also at least one episode where the theme actually stays consistent. In the third episode, Troy Stevens encounters a creepy old hag, played by Pat Crawford Brown, who gives him a ring that claims to determine his fortune, but is actually cursed, resulting in him getting chased by ninjas. I especially like the part where one of the ninjas punches the cameraman before the ad break. That gave me a laugh. But aside from that, it's mostly just a bunch of random thrown at you, and that's it. When I first heard of the show and saw the first episode, I thought it looked okay, but after binge watching through several episodes, I was left kinda confused and ripped off, for a game show with this much talent in it. Some jokes may work here and there, and the gameplay elements are pretty close to the source material, but there's also jokes that are either stale or predictable, some cruel and uncomfortable moments, and it's just overall not as fun as the wonderful writing and innovation the computer games brought us. And I guess critics and audiences felt the same way, as the show received mixed reviews upon its initial airing. But the biggest crime that can be committed on television is not having people watch your show, which is exactly what happened. You Don't Know Jack did not perform well in the ratings, which led to ABC canceling the show after only 6 episodes. The final episode would air on July 18th, 2001, less than a month after its premiere. And after that, the show quietly faded into obscurity. So why did the You Don't Know Jack game show fail? Aside from the mixed reception, there are 2 other theories. For one, there was poor timing. The show premiered in 2001. You Don't Know Jack had arguably reached its peak in the late 90s, with hits like The Ride and The Net Show taking the world by storm. But by the early 2000s, the craze was beginning to die down, and by the time the game show was finally picked up by a major network, it was too late. And then there was the poor marketing, or lack thereof. Many fans of the franchise were unaware of the show's existence, and slapping an As Seen on TV sticker on You Don't Know Jack games didn't help much. The combination of all those reasons led to poor viewership, which ultimately led to its cancellation. It's a shame really, as the game show did have potential. It just wasn't well executed, to the point where the game's creators have mostly distanced themselves from it in recent years. Following the show's cancellation, Jellyvision began shifting its focus towards business software, leaving its gaming business dormant for a number of years. They would, however, get at least one more game show off the ground with Smush, which aired on the USA Network in late 2001. Unlike You Don't Know Jack, the show was better well received and also lasted a lot longer, albeit by 5 months. But apart from 1 or 2 games, the You Don't Know Jack craze had all but come to an end. Until the reboot came out in 2011. As for Paul Reubens, aside from some major slip-ups here and there, he would continue his film and television career, mostly playing small roles. He even brought back the Pee-wee character in the 2010 stage shows, and in the 2016 Netflix film Pee-wee's Big Holiday. Sadly, on July 30th, 2023, Paul Reubens passed away after a private battle with cancer, at the age of 70. While he'll mostly be remembered for his role as Pee-wee Herman, his role as Troy Stevens in You Don't Know Jack has grown a little cult following amongst fans. Sure, he's no Cookie, Nate, or Schmitty, but he brought a unique personality that helped stand the others out. Despite the show's initial failure, it's slowly being rediscovered by audiences, and we like to rediscover things, especially if it's based on a successful property. With the Jackbox games becoming more and more popular, it's inevitable that a TV show might be coming in the future, but only time will tell. For now, though, we'll have this little gem of a game show to cherish. Rest in peace, Troy Stevens.